Hey, and we're live. It's Jürgen here at Polymash, and I welcome you all to SEO Saturdays, our podcast, our edition of a live stream coming to you from rainy Florida. It is a perfect weather at the moment to be socially distancing, but let's flip the script on that. It's actually physical distancing and we're socially connecting, I hope. I'm here with my lovely wife and partner, Robin Strattenberg-Kessel as well. Say hi, Robin.
Yes, hi everybody, and welcome from me. And I'm looking forward to supporting Jürgen and checking in on the chat space.
Awesome. So, yeah, we're trying something new. I mean, this live stream thing is fairly new to us. Last time I forgot to press the start button, and in fact, that caused us to be about 5 minutes late, and no music. So I'm hoping that we got a better kickoff this time around. So I am very excited to also invite some guests in this time. And so we have some dial-in guests and hoping to cover a bunch of SEO submissions and applications that we receive from people. With that, let's get started.
And so, yes, Jürgen, let me invite people, if you accepted our invitation with an application to have your show looked at during this live streaming. That's great. Thank you. And we'd love it if you'd say hello so that we have a sense of that you're here. And also, if you didn't sign up for anything, if you chose not to submit an application and you're lurking because you're curious, that's fantastic. And we welcome your curiosity. So please also let us know if you choose that you're here, say hello. And of course, it's always fun to know where you're from in the world.
Exactly. We're good lurkers, aren't we, Robbie?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we do that all the time. But I'd love if you participate. Let us know where you're coming from and, where you're dialing in from. And, let us know that you're here. Okay. And I see Sourdough Power out in LA, and he is the host of the Not Real Art podcast. It's an awesome show. I encourage you all to check it out and joining us here for the second week. And I also see folks from Creative Outhouse and Rudy Fernandez, joining us. I believe you guys are from Atlanta, and I believe we're going to be connecting via Skype, which is a new thing for us. And we're going to be dialing you in to, be live on the show later. I'm really looking forward to that. And but maybe before we do, I should sort of talk through how this all works, and what we're going to be doing. So the idea is that what we wanted to do in these times is to help podcasters learn how to leverage their websites to drive traffic to their podcasts. And we sort of refer to this as flipping the script. And, I have a couple of slides that I always like to run through. For those of you who've been on the live show before, I know that might be a little repetitive, but for those folks that are here for the first time, it's kind of an important base layer. We also, if you go onto polymash.com/live, where not only can you apply for your own podcast, but you can also find a mini course based on our presentation that we gave at PodFest recently, and where we explain our whole content marketing methodology that's worked so well to help boost not only our own podcast, but our clients' podcasts as well. So go and check that out if you have not. Of course, we would love it if you were to subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's lots of podcasting related content there, gear reviews, things like that, in addition to our SEO Saturdays. So we wanted to give a couple of shout outs today. Robbie, do you want to maybe talk to us about, what's new and what's the best thing that happened to you this week? I should know, but why don't you enlighten us? And because I know that you just launched, another season of your show.
Well, actually, it's launching on the 4th of May. In fact, I want it to be the 4th of May, like the force be with you. However, it's actually going to be the 5th of May. I thought Tuesday was a better day than Monday. And this is actually my 5th season. So throughout this session today, or this live stream today, I might jump in with some of my personal story. I've been podcasting since 2014, and part of that is because I have a wonderful in-house coach and in person who inspires me so much, and that's obviously Jürgen. So he's been here helping and cheering me on. But at the same time, I mean, this is a reciprocal arrangement. I've been his guinea pig. So I have been the test case for all the stuff that we're now able to teach over these 6 years of being in the podcasting field.
All the failures have been done on your behalf, and and the successes now are what our clients are benefiting from, right? Yeah,
but so I've been through all of this, so I know it works, and as I say, like 6 years later and 5 seasons in, it's very exciting.
So thank you for that. That's awesome. I mean, good luck with the May the Force be with you. Maybe the Cinco de Mayo be with you. I mean, maybe
yes, that's true.
It's really sort of more the
both.
My mojito. Well, what are we going to have to celebrate your launch? Do you think?
Don't you have tequila on?
Yes.
I don't know. Maybe those people down south can tell us.
How about we'll do both? I don't know. What do you do? Okay, you guys in the audience, please let us know. What to do to celebrate a podcast launch on the 5th of May. Given
the season launch. Okay. But, we're looking forward to that. I also wanted to give a shout out to Chris Krimitzos and the Florida Podcast Network and Association. He hosted the first virtual meetup. This was a meetup that actually is behind PodFest, one of the largest podcasting conferences in the United States. Chris is an amazing host and generous supporter of the podcasting community, and he puts on an awesome event, and we were there in March just before coronavirus sort of moved things into the virtual realm, I should say, because Chris this week actually published the first Zoom meetup that tons of people were on. It was a fun event. We got Zoom bombed twice, and he said he didn't mind, and it was harmless pretty much. But I think he learned how to prevent that going forward in the future as well. A shout out to our friends from Atlanta and from elsewhere that may not be part of the Florida Podcasters Association. I know you guys were at PodFest, or at least Susan, you were. So I would just invite you guys to check out that on Facebook and join the Facebook group, because it's an awesome happening. And it occurs to me that with these Zoom calls now, we're taking this virtually. Chris is taking this virtually, and he brings in amazing speakers and experts from all over the podcasting universe, and it was really fun. It was a fun evening to hang out with those folks. Also wanted to give a shout out to Rudy and Susan, who are going to be our guests later on. We're going to have a closer look and brainstorm a little bit about SEO ideas for their Marketing Upheaval show. So the show is called Marketing Upheaval. One of the things that I want to stress about these shout outs that we're doing on the show, we're doing them kind of deliberately, because what we're hoping to provide you with as well is in the show articles that we publish after we finish our live streams. That should be next week sometime, a recap in the video, and that will get posted on the Polymash site. And of course, you will earn a high domain authority backlink to your own website, and that's part of the benefit of getting in. I think that we'll do a little shout out, feature your podcast in the articles as well, and that's why I encourage everyone to submit their podcast and to apply for their podcast to be part of this event, because we're all here to support each other. Robbie, anything on your end? Sure. So we have, Susan is here from Creative Outhouse,
Yes.
And we know we have Susan's application, which is fantastic. And I understand that she is partnering or working with Rudy, my understanding, right? And then we have John Roth's channel, and we have, I think they're the new ones that have just come on. Yep.
Terrific. And John.
So John Roth,
let us know more about.
Yeah, I don't know where. Yeah, John, thank you for being here. Looking forward to knowing more about you.
And so maybe with that, I'll jump into just sort of the introduction as to what we mean by SEO Saturdays, and why this is helping podcasters, not just ourselves. And so with that, maybe what I'll do is jump into a quick couple of overview slides that I'm going to pull up here. Okay, good. Can you guys see that? I think so. So the goals for today and for all of our SEO Saturdays are to sort of shift our thinking around the roles and the role that our website plays for our podcast. And actually, one of the submissions we had today was from someone who does not yet have a website for their podcast. I'm hoping that that's going to be meaningful for them to sort of learn, well, why would you and why is it important? So we wanted to also do a little bit of a live demo of how we conduct SEO research for both podcast names, for brand new podcasters, as well as for episode titles, and getting in once you're up and running and you have a good website, how you can use content marketing strategies to help actually attract traffic to your show and gain subscribers. So, and we're going to hopefully answer lots of questions that we might get. So with that, I wanted to just provide an example or two of what's possible. And this is something that we always do at the podcasting meetups. We ask this question. So here's a brand new show. Well, it's actually now a year old. It's no longer brand new, but it was a show that launched almost exactly in March of 2019. Excuse me. And so we always ask this question, so he has had 190,000 downloads, and, whether that's good stat or a bad stat, we all have some downloads after X number of months. But my question here is, what percentage of these listeners do you think visited his website for the podcast articles, also sometimes known as show notes? Do you think that was 5%? Because most people answer 5, 10% maybe. Most people are skeptical. You guys, let me know in the comments. What do you think the number would be? Scott, no cheating. You know what the number is. So I know that most podcasters that are asked this question think that it's in about the 10% or 20% range, because the way that they think of this is they think that they mention something or they try to give a call to action on their audio, in the audio of their podcast, to say, hey, to learn more about us, go to my show at xnx.com. And Robbie, I know you do that. I mean, I think that's still good practice, right? It's what we want to, we want to have those calls to action. We want to encourage our listeners to check out the website. We want to give them gifts. Robin, in fact, you had something called the positivity lens that you mentioned on the, why don't you tell listeners about that for a sec?
Yes, absolutely. So my podcast is actually called Positivity Strategist. That's my brand and my website, and I failed to mention that last time. But what Jürgen's referring to is that I wrote long-form show notes that were, SEO optimized and all the textbook stuff and following our system. And in order to invite people to grow my list and to have them subscribe to the show, I offered them some 3 tips of the week. So all the people that I was interviewing in those early days were giving strategies of positivity, what they did in their businesses, in their relationships, in their communities, and what they did at home that really helped them focus more on the positive and be more, and energized and enlivened in their life. And so so I would then write that up, and people would then subscribe to that, and they would get a very beautiful PDF of what the tips were that the guest had shared. And then at the beginning of the next show, the following week, I would review those tips and say, hey, who did X, Y, and Z. And so it was really to keep people engaged from week to week, and even offering them something that they could practice, because the whole idea was that we were doing something that they could apply to their lives. So whatever your field is, whatever your mission is, whatever your craft is, that could be a way that you might think, well, here are some tips, some strategies that I can offer people. And then you say, well, how did it go?
And so how do you feel that worked for you, Robbie?
Oh, it was awesome. It was a little bit of work, but as I say, this was like 2014, 2015, 2016. So, and also having reached #1 on iTunes at the time, because it was really still, podcasts were just coming back again. And it really helped. It helped grow an audience. It helped grow a community. At that stage, there were comments going onto the show notes. So it was good. Like all things, you move on and times change, but that was a really good strategy to start with.
Yeah, I think perhaps that's, that strategy is a little harder today, but so what I meant to imply here with this question isn't that the substitute or that, that you shouldn't be doing that, but take a look at what happened here in this example of this podcast. So actually 138% of people visited his website, and you're thinking, what? How's that even possible? Well, it's because of the SEO optimization of the show notes articles or the podcast long form articles for each episode that became visible, and that we did hard work to SEO optimize those articles and have them rank for key phrases that we carefully selected and researched. But those key phrases and those articles wound up driving 261,000 page views to Ken's podcast. And that in turn now is flipping the script, meaning, Ken's subscribers are coming from Google search. They're coming from the fact that people are searching for his topic, finding his articles online, and the articles happen to be write-ups from podcast episodes, and that's what's driving his subscriber base. So, that is, that's the idea. And that is for the folks who are joining us, that's what we're hoping to achieve here. And, it creates list growth. He's getting lots of traffic. Actually, it's an important point, but there's an ROI to this. So he's getting about $2,000 worth of free traffic every month. And, his courses are sold out. His coaching incentives are sold out. So that's the real benefit, behind using this strategy in the long term. So, for myself as well, I had a podcast a year ago. I badly pod faded. I'm doing live streams now, but I'm getting some $3,000 worth of traffic on a monthly basis. And what other marketing method, from your podcast can you think of that would drive these leads to your site? And I would personally take 100 email list subscribers against 1,000 anonymous iTunes listeners, because I cannot connect with them. I don't know who they are. And, here it's clear that you have a chance to offer them more of your content and to do inbound type content marketing. So, that's that's basically the idea. That's basically the idea behind, why we are doing this. And, so I'm hoping I'm going to just jump in real quick to one of the submissions that we got from someone. I'm not sure whether she's on. Her name was Donna Bridges with the Sweet Tea and Southern Chit Chat podcast. And I'm going to pull that up on the screen real quick. So here she is, and she submitted her podcast. So just for game plan, let me take a step back. I'd like to go through that one, and then I would want to invite for the next podcast that we're looking to help. I'd love to invite Rudy and Susan to dial in via Skype in about 10, 15 minutes or so, and hear from them and hear about their show. But just quickly, here's the Sweet Tea and Southern Chit Chat podcast. And Donna was asking how to add the correct SEO to each podcast to the blog. Now, that got me a little curious, because what she submitted, when I actually then look at the link that she sent me for her blog or website, what that link actually was a link to iTunes. And I thought, okay, so she just went live, this is a new show. Apparently it's got like 2 episodes. But from this, I sort of surmise that maybe she doesn't have a website yet. She's hosted on Buzzsprout, We have 2 submissions today from Buzzsprout, and more about that later. So when I'm looking for her podcast on Buzzsprout or elsewhere, or when let's do a search for Sweet Tea and Southern Chit Chat and see what comes up. And if I just go in, okay, Buzzsprout is the first search results. I know that she also has a Facebook page that she's launching, but basically the goal would be for her website to start showing up as the first thing in the search results and not any entry on Buzzsprout. And that when someone goes and, for example, goes to one of her episodes, so here's the little, write-up that she did, and I have to assume that her question was around, how do you do SEO for these types of write-ups? Well, the SEO doesn't benefit anyone but Buzzsprout, because anyone searching like I just did would stumble not across her website, not across her own, maybe even Facebook page or her own presence. What they're winding up at is the Buzzsprout episode. And moreover, if I was now to share this episode, let's say that I was going to give her a shout out on Twitter, look at what happens. Actually, what's being shared is not a website of hers, but again, Buzzsprout, like many of these large content providers, they love getting the traffic for themselves. And so that's something that we always look for. And so I'm hoping that just from a big picture perspective, that for Donna, just the value of having a website in the first place is, kind of clear as a result of this. I know she has a beautiful Facebook page that she's building. And, so there is a presence that's starting to be built up. But the asset that is the business asset that you own, from our perspective, is super important. Anyone has any questions or insight on that? I mean, Robbie, what do you, what's your point of view on helping Donna? What would your recommendation be for her as a next step?
Well, yes, me, Jürgen, I tend to go mega and go out there and think, what's the overarching strategy here? So, what's the intention of the, and I know this is not very practical, but what's the overarching intention of the show, and therefore what's the audience that you're wanting to attract? And then, working down from there. So I think, if Donna were to get clarity around how she wants her show to be found. And one of the things that, we've talked a lot about is having guests who will be co-creators and co-promoters. And maybe you were going to get into that later, but I think it comes down to, and it depends, of course, whether or not you are a solo podcaster. But if you are inviting people to be your guests, then you've got 2 shots on, I don't like that metaphor, but you've got 2 opportunities to broadcast your show if you have a guest who is willing to be proud of what they've done and can work with you on the, promoting it. But it all comes down to the website. So having that website to start with, and then hopefully getting your blog post posted on your guest's website, even if it's just the URL, because that's great. We understand that's great. Backlinks for the host.
Yeah, thank you, Robbie. I mean, I think that's exactly right. And I think that, we in fact had sort of a slide about that, is like, how do you want people to find you? And if you consider, that question, do you want them to find you on Apple Podcasts? Most podcasters would probably say yes. I'd be happy for them to find me on Apple Podcasts or Google Podcast or elsewhere. So when you type in, here's an example from, you can see that, let me remove my little face there out of the corner. But this is from the Unseen podcast. It's just something that I picked at random. But when you Google the Unseen podcast, what happens is that you see Stitcher, you see Audio Boom, you see Twitter, you see Apple Podcasts. And from our perspective, that's not really what you want to happen. From our perspective, what you want to see happen is like what's happening with Ken's podcast, for example, the Deeper Dating podcast, is that it comes up first in the search results. So the value of somebody Googling your show and then winding up on your website can't be overstated from where we're setting. And so that then becomes a question of, well, how do you do that? So for Donna, maybe the first advice is that, you should build your own website somewhere that is dedicated to your podcast. And then the factors that actually contribute to whether or not a podcast, or a website ranks has to do with domain authority, which is a industry standard, an industry ranking standard by a company named Moz, but it very accurately reflects how likely you are to be on page 1 or page 2 of the search results. So with a good domain authority, and it goes from 0 to 100, we'll see some examples of this today, is that if you're in the 20s or 30s, you can start to get content onto page 1. I rank for a ton of podcast-related keywords, hundreds, and on page 1 and 2, and my domain authority is only 34. So it's not like you have to be 100 or even 60. Like government organizations, are like in the 60s. Google is the 100. Facebook is like way up there. So it varies a little bit, and sort of like your average blog or business website might be in the 20s or 30s or 40s. Unfortunately, that has mostly to do with age. But the other factor is links. And this is what Robin started to touch upon, and I want to get back to that strongly later, because getting your guests to post a little link or a little blog or a little update on their website that links to a big one. Yep, absolutely. But getting your guests to link to your show and to the episode where you interviewed them, right? Because really, from my perspective, it's a thing of you're doing, a lot of work in preparing the podcast. You're doing a lot of work in writing up the article for it. You're linking to your guest's website. And so we almost insist on, in a polite way, but we insist on that the guest reciprocates and gives us a link back, because that incoming link is one of the biggest biggest ranking factor that contributes to why your website will grow and how it will grow. So if you're not doing that today, and you have an interview show, really think about whether you can somehow ask your guests.
Yeah, and I think it's worthwhile revisiting. It'd be lovely if we could all be having a voice chat here to get everyone's perspectives, but revisiting what's the intention of the show, and and to recognize that what you're producing, unless it's just a hobby, but it's a great asset. So it's really viewing your own content and then the people that you're interacting with as valuable an asset, not only for you, but also for them. It's taking that perspective of, you have something to be appreciated and to be shared and to be valued.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, couldn't agree more. And so that's, if you can communicate that to your guests and earn that inbound link from your interview, that will go a long way towards having your website go up in the rankings. The next one is long form content. Google values long form content, and that means in their parlance 2,000 words or above. There seem to be some deflection points. I mean, if you have content that's less than 300 words, you will seldom find anything less than 300 words on page 1 of Google. And that means that it's not going to generate traffic for you. There's an inflection point at sort of 700 is kind of the accepted minimum for bloggers and podcasters, so that if your show articles are any shorter than that, reconsider. The good news is that the way that we do it and the way that, you will see that Susan and Rudy, for example, who will be on in a few minutes, they might tell us a little more about that, but they are taking their transcripts and converting them into long-form articles that are disguised. It's not just a transcript pasted to the bottom of your episode article. It's actually a beautifully organized article that I think Google, would value. So having long-form content, is another contributing factor. A low bounce rate means that getting content that people stay on your website and explore and jump off to other points. So if you have related content, if you have the type of WordPress plugin that actually measures how far a user scrolls and communicates that back to Google. Google then knows that it wasn't a bounce. So what Google means by bounce is that landed on a page, looked at it for a second, nope, not for me, and I'm out of here, right? That's a bounce. And the rate at which that happens is called the bounce rate. And, this might happen with somebody Googles something, finds an episode of yours. And so now your job is to draw them in with high quality content, with some images, with related content that you might have. And, and by also installing something that'll measure your scroll depth so that Google realizes, oh, they didn't just leave. They were here for 15, 20 minutes. On Ken's podcast, some people enjoy listening to the show while reading through the transcript as well. That's awesome, right? I feel like, his bounce rate is super low in those instances. And then the last one that I would mention here is traffic and social signals, which means that when you're sharing or when your audience is sharing your content on social media, Google recognizes and sort of measures that and factors that in. So a page of equal value, of equal content that gets tweeted about a lot or that gets shared on Facebook a lot, will rank better than a page that does not. So those are the factors. And so then what can you do about it? And the last thing before we go and have Rudy and Susan on that I want to talk about here is selecting the right name and website for your podcast in the first place. And this comes back to maybe Donna, but I also want to jump over and actually share another submission that we received from a gentleman named Ken Smith. So just give me a second here. I'm going to try to pull that in. So can you guys see this? So he submitted his podcast, or he applied for his podcast, and it's sales ideas for health insurance agents. And he hasn't quite launched this yet, so he's still thinking, he's still flexible in terms of what the podcast name could be. And we've been sort of doing a little bit of real research on, selling health insurance. There's a golden opportunity here with how you can select a smart podcast name and take out the website for it and get instant traffic from it. And let me give you an example of that. And then I want to help Ken if he's around, if he's watching this later, because I think I have a really great idea for how this could work for him. We had an example in the story that I wanted to tell folks of someone who approached us, and that's a sort of like an idea of a domain authority tricks. He approached us with a show called hang on, it was called, and I changed the name around. Just give me a moment to get to the story. Here it is, 5 Palms Capital Podcast. So this was a brand new real estate podcast. I changed the name slightly because I didn't want to step on his brand, right? But it was about multifamily apartment investing. That was the topic of the show. And 5 Palms Capital is the name of his company. But he has a brand new site, sort of like what Donna is probably going to be dealing with if she launched a brand new site. Something that Ken, from Mesa Financial would also be dealing with if he launched a brand new site. And the domain authority for that site was 4. And what does that have to do with anything? So let me do a little bit of research here on his behalf. So don't be confused by the screen. We started to look up the keyword for apartment investment. And the software that we use for that is KW Finder. There's an affiliate link in the thing if you're interested in on polymash.com/live or on the bottom of the YouTube description. But basically, when you are doing research, it gives you keyword ideas. And the keyword ideas are focusing on stuff that people are actually looking for. And I'm going to try to zoom in. On that a little bit here. So you can see that apartment investment actually has 1,300 people per month searching for that term. And it has what's called keyword difficulty of 26, which is good. It's got a low keyword difficulty. That's in this next section of the slides. So the keyword difficulty or key phrase difficulty tells you how likely it is that how competitive is this? And here's the competition. These are on the bottom of this page here. These are the people that are actually ranking on page 1 for this podcast. I mean, for this term, sorry, for apartment investment. And you can see that there's Fortune Builders and Commercial Properties, Forbes.com. So major companies, it'll be hard to compete with them because they have a high domain authority. And that's the next thing that I wanted to point out is that when this keyword research tool highlights the domain authority of the people that you are competing with, and when you're selecting your podcast name or your episode titles, this is where you spend a bit of time to see whether, is that high, is that low? Can I compete with this or not? And so when we did this for Ken, something jumped out at me. I noticed a couple of things. One, okay, great. 1,300 people actually searching for this. The keyword difficulty is still easy. And then I came across this one down here, apartmentinvestmentfund.com. And look at that. They only have a domain authority of 3. Now, how is that possible? And that is the whole key here, is that take a look at what the name of that what the name of that blog or website is. I'll try to zoom in here. It's Apartment Investment Fund. So it has the key phrase as part of the domain. And that's the big aha moment for all of us, really, because what I'm saying here is in this 5 Palms Capital podcast, if he was to rename it to the Apartment Investment Podcast and take out the domain apartmentinvestment.com, he would rank on page 1 of Google within weeks, even though it would be a very low domain authority, because it's got the domain name. The key phrase is the domain name. So apartmentinvestmentpodcast.com, you could do that almost instantaneously. So, that's a really powerful concept. And so with that, I want to jump back to Ken. And, so I sort of had a look at selling health insurance. He could have a podcast called the Selling Health Insurance Podcast. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. So we're doing this live now. So there are 330 searches for that with a low keyword difficulty. But if he had sellinghealthinsurancepodcast.com, he would surely be on this page and gain some of that traffic for a brand new podcast. I had another look at one, healthinsurancesalespodcast.com. Could that work maybe? Let's have a look. 170, not that great, but then I found one which I think is, awesome. I sent him an old email about it, because this one, what if we called this podcast the insuranceleadspodcast.com? Almost 2,000 people are searching for it a month. It's still easy. And he would be, look, there's one with a domain authority 1626. So I'm sure that he could rank on that. There is a website called insuranceleads.com. So that domain is no longer available, but insuranceleadspodcast.com would be. So does that make sense, you guys? Let me know in the comments if that's resonating with you. And that's an example. I mean, another one that I will just pull up is a site that actually I created for Katie Krimitzos. I helped her redesign, her site, and she picked I didn't take credit for the domain name. She picked womensmeditationnetwork.com. So she took out this, this domain, and she has a podcast there. And now look, if I type in women's, am I spelling that right? If I look for the word women's meditation network comes up in position 1. It comes up in position 2. It's getting 2,100 searches a month, and she's killing it. She's doing awesome with this idea. So the whole point that I'm trying to make is, so Katie's getting lots and lots of traffic to her website that we created for, her podcast. And, and she's getting a significant amount of subscribers from the fact that, she's being found for anybody looking for women's meditation and related topics. So I'm hoping, you guys, that makes sense. Shout out to Katie and her podcast here. And so with that, thank you, Rudy says makes sense. Thanks for joining us, Rudy and Susan. maybe what you'd like to do is try to give me a ring on the Skype, and we can switch over and start sort of exploring a little bit about. You can share a little bit your details on your show, and we could start exploring a little bit about that. Let me see whether I'll jump over to Skype, and I'll have to probably answer there. But if you and Susan could try to give me a ring now, we'll try to make that work. Like I said, it's kind of a new experience for us. And, Robbie, I'm sort of just standing by. I'm not sure whether anyone else in the comments had anything to say about that.
No, Jürgen, I'm sure you just grabbed everybody's attention. They were just commenting or chatting. I can hear some Skype ringing.
I am ringing Susan at the moment, and hopefully we'll get a connection here, and then maybe I can pop in Rudy as well. But while we're waiting, it still just says connecting, so I'm not sure whether we're getting through or not.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Hey, we can, and let me just see. So Susan, is your video on?
Let me turn my video on.
There you are, right?
There you go. Hey.
Hey, okay. And Susan, can you see what, can you see still a split screen with us on? Oh, that's awesome.
Yes.
Okay, that's great. Because that means that when we jump over to do screen sharing, we can still be connected. So thank you so much for dialing in. So should I give Rudy a call as well and see whether he can join us?
Yes.
Let me just see. I'm not sure whether we connected or not. I think we did.
He said he had it pulled up, so
it's all a bit new and for us.
This is the time where we're all getting practiced at this, right? So
yeah.
Even though we're socially connecting, but we're physically distancing, so we can play with all these wonderful tools.
Okay, so now it should be ringing on Rudy's side as well, and we'll see whether we can get him into a split screen as well. And it's ringing. This is live for you, so guys, just hang in. I'll put a little music on while we're waiting. Here's the suspenseful.
So Rudy's saying in the chat space, Jürgen, that he's the only one on the call.
Oh,
there he is. I see him now.
I just see him.
I see me there again. Okay.
And I am going to, Rudy, bring you into a three-way here. So can you guys see that okay? You should be seeing sort of like a three-way split screen.
That's awesome.
Okay, very cool. I can fade out the music now that we've gotten over the suspense. So you guys are in Atlanta, yes?
Yes.
Yes, I'm getting a reverb, so everything you say I heard twice.
Rudy, do you have your YouTube muted?
I do have. I don't have my YouTube. Sorry. Now I have my YouTube muted. Sorry. Now I'm okay.
Did that help? Good. Okay.
Yes. Sorry about that.
No, very cool. So I'm excited to have you guys here. Tell us about your show and and let us know a little bit about your journey so far.
You want me to go, or do you want to go?
You go.
Okay. It's called Marketing Upheaval, and we've been really fortunate to have some fantastic guests. They're marketing leaders, they're CEOs, CMOs, people who have sort of their fingers on the pulse of things that are going on. And I think we're in 35 episodes. Is that right? Something like that?
Yes.
And different industries. I think we're enjoying it very much. We started this show originally to drive more traffic and to get more interest from our, try to attract our audience for our marketing agency, which is called Creative Outhouse. Mm-hmm. So the purpose of the podcast was lead gen. And I think in the process, we've sort of been learning a little bit at a time what we can do better each time. Go ahead. But I'm sure I missed a lot, but go ahead. I'm the host. Susan produces the show.
Yeah.
And it's an interview format.
Awesome. And so how is it going in terms of lead gen? Is that, I'm sure you're getting some feedback, right? And I mean, from us, look, we're an agency too. I've had a show and sort of the benefits often were unexpected. I think that it'd be fair to say, and I'm not sure, about you, Robbie, but, the the benefits that we've gotten, weren't maybe exactly what we set out, but they were awesome relationships. We certainly have gotten clients from it. Maybe not the massive lead gen that we were expecting, but 1,000 benefits that we never would have thought of in the first place. So I'm not sure how that went for you.
It hasn't gone that way at all for us. In that we haven't. We can point to maybe one where it helped get a client, but we haven't gotten any clients from it. I guess we maintain a little bit of a relationship with some of our previous guests, but no, I think that's one of the reasons we're here, is try to figure out how can we, because I think we have a lot of robust content. I could be wrong, but it's just not not working.
It's a beautiful site. I guess we'll start sharing a little bit with our audience, because first of all, you guys sent in you sent in the your website. You should be seeing this now, right? So you guys built a very attractive looking site, and I'm not sure, Susan, whether you guys are doing like current design work on the site, and like what whether you keep changing things up, but I'm trying to scroll through slowly. It's very attractive looking. I mean, the most important part, of course, is that you have long form show notes that, for example, if I open this episode, a recent episode, cannabis marketing, you've got the long form content nailed. It looks great. It's based on an interview. Based on a transcript. And Susan, maybe, talk a little bit about is this, you're getting a transcript from Rev and then, putting it in, you're using StoryChief, which is our favorite platform. Maybe tell me a little about how this has gone in terms of you doing some of this.
Yes. Well, I learned a lot of this from you at Podfest. Previously, we'd gotten transcripts from Rev or Otter.ai and just plugged the transcripts directly in. But I learned from you the tools about SEMrush and sort of disguising your transcripts a little bit. And so just within the last few weeks, I've started using the subheads to sort of disguise the transcripts more and make it more SEO friendly.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also I've realized, by using the subheads, that gives you an opportunity to use more keywords.
Correct.
As well.
Exactly. Like you could also use images for keywords a little more, maybe. I don't know. I mean, have you discovered the built-in image search engine inside StoryChief?
Yes.
Because you can then in the captions or in the alt tags, add more prevalence for those keywords. But so, so you guys, can I share a couple of just, notes on the very surface on, like that things that came to mind when I had a look here.
Sure.
So just know that this comes entirely from a place of love, and it's not meant as notes to things that to continue to improve on, because that's the journey that we're all on, right? So the very first thing that jumped out at me is actually a URL structure, and I'm not sure whether you can see what I'm highlighting here. I'm going to see whether in the live here, that I can zoom in on that. Can people see that? Can you guys see that? What I'm pulling up?
Yes.
So what I'm focusing on here is that your URL structure is date based. So you have creativeouthouse.com and then 2020 or 414, and then let's say the title of the podcast. And generally, from an SEO perspective, people recommend to not do that, because the SEO keyword winds up getting pushed beyond your dates. There are a lot of reasons, right? You're basically taking away any evergreen value by, making it very obvious when this content was created. And just the ranking in general just works a lot better when you remove that sort of a date structure from your site. So in WordPress, changing the permalink structure is something that I would recommend. Now, that's a little adventurous, but I have a solution for you. Because the adventurous part on that is that if you do that, what's going to happen is that any share on social media, any index that Google already has, any sitemap that might be out there, people would be, people then typing in, 2024 14, or sharing that on social media, they will get a 404 not found error if you not go and change that, because the content's already live, right? So but this is, you're not the first people who thought of this and actually had to do that for a few sites. So what I want to show you is that there's a link that, and I'll share this with you afterwards as well, but the Permalink Structure, if you wanted to go to a Permalink Structure where it's creativeouthouse.com/cannabis. Oh, hang on, and I still a bit zoomed in here. Sorry, can you guys see this okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Yoast, which you're probably using anyway on a WordPress site, Yoast is a plugin that is an SEO plugin, and they actually have what's called a 301 redirect helper. Okay, and when we go and open that helper, again, I'll send you the link to this. What they do is allow you to migrate from one to another automatically. So you put this into your htaccess file in your root directory of your site, and it is called, it is a regular expression HTTP redirect that will take all of your content across the entire site from years ago and basically remap it to this new format. It'll remove the date and replace it. So let's go, right? So we're going to go and look at
and you won't get a broken link if you do that?
Yep, correct. None of your links will get broken. None of your rank will get diluted. In fact, your rank will increase by doing this, because your site will start getting re-indexed over time to no longer have those dates in it. So I should be going to creativeouthouse.com/cannabis industry. By the way, what was the key phrase for this, Susan?
I think I made it cannabis industry.
So another little tip is whenever you can, don't make the slug, the URL slug, longer than the keyword if you have to, right? So and because it gets diluted, right? So cannabis industry will rank better than cannabis industry -brand -marketing, right? So if that was the key phrase that you're going after, try to shorten the slug to only the key phrase that you're going after, because most of the time that's possible, but it will rank better that way. So that's just an aside. So now let's take a look at what would have to happen on Yoast, as we're going to go in and take the base URL of your site. I'm assuming that it's not sitting in a subfolder. I see that it's not. Also assuming that you're running on Apache or not. So before we would implement this, or before you go implement this, there's two types of web servers, NGINX and Apache. Most of hosting sites run on Apache, so that's the example that we use now. But you could just have your own web tech guy basically run through this little exercise that we're doing here. So right now, your URL structure is day and name. So your URLs are 2020, 04, 02, something, right? And then the name of the post. So this is the one that you need to click. And if I now click on the generate redirect button, this is the piece of code. So this URL helper helps you generate the code that would now need to go into the htaccess file. So where is the htaccess file? Let me just see whether I can show you an example of where it lives on my own site, for example. Oops. Now open my email mistakenly. Joys of live streaming. What I'm trying to share with you is my FTP client called, and I'm going to log into Polymash, my own website. And if I'm now looking at my own website, you see there is a file here called htaccess. And, that's the file that, that would need to be edited. So, like if I was to now open that in an editor, I would, I'm going to cancel that. But, that's where the statement would need to live, and that would do the redirect for your site. So I'm hoping that that's helpful. It's a little technical, but that will, I guarantee you, that will have a positive effect on your site. So let's have a look at just your site in general. So your domain authority is 22. And, you know, that'll just keep growing over time. There's very little you can do about the domain authority simply because it's mostly age-based. Your Alexa ranking in the 3 millions is actually a little surprising. I would have thought that you would be in about 1 million. So Alexa ranking works the opposite way, meaning the lower the number, the better. And, you know, you're shooting for something in like 1 million, you know, I think I'm like 170,000 or something like that. So I probably too in depth to try to go and figure out why, if you're posting regular content, your Alexa ranking isn't better. But go to the Alexa website and just kind of poke around and see what they have to say. They've got a great set of tools that would allow you, you know, to look. But basically, you know, you're close to being able to, you know, you should be able to get some content out there. So one of the things that I noticed, just like we were doing earlier, when I share an episode here on Twitter, look at where it points to. Buzzsprout, and not your own website. And I think that's another recommendation that I would have, is that in Buzzsprout, they support a custom URL. And that custom URL should be the URL for this episode. It should be this. And in fact, let me just see whether I actually should have put that on. Hang on.
So in effect, what we're saying, Jürgen, is that using that key phrase that Susan had, cannabis industry. So if anyone's searching for cannabis industry, our hope would be that that keyword show up, their website or that page would show up on page 1 of Google. That's the ultimate goal, right?
That's the goal, correct. You know, as far as possible. And so the trick with that is that you need to select key phrases that are commensurate with the domain authority of your website. And for you, that might mean that, for example, cannabis industries, let's have a look at how that key phrase performs. I think there are searches for it, sure enough, but it's a pretty difficult keyword for someone with a domain authority 20. So you might need to go for longer tail keywords, because if I look at, if that makes sense, right?
So and that particular example is not one that we would have on our website anywhere else normally. That was just the topic of that episode. So that's not
exactly right. So,
but it's really more about the branding and the marketing. So maybe a way to push that up, you know, instead of industry, for example, you know, more about branding and marketing.
Yes, that's like maybe cannabis branding might be like, I don't know. Let's have a look at what KW Finder alternatives are.
That's an important insight, though, you know, that you want this consistency, that you're going to be found for something that is cohesive and consistent across the whole website.
Yeah, that was actually a question I had.
Go ahead, Susan.
As I was creating that page, I actually thought of that. I thought, well, cannabis branding might be better. However, in the transcript, nobody ever said cannabis branding. So it doesn't really work. You have that as a subhead, but nobody ever actually says it in the transcript.
I get it. You know what? We are ruthless. We will put words into people's mouths. You know, like we will go and change the transcript to suit an SEO purpose if it's if it's a good opportunity.
Or an alt tag and an image helps. Right?
Yeah, an alt tag and an image. You know, there are some ways in which you could, you know, get those key phrases still in. But you know what is like, you can reserve that for when it's a really good opportunity that you don't want to miss out on, when the keyword difficulty is low enough to where, you know, you really want to go for it. And in this case, I mean, even with cannabis branding, if I take a look at it, it's 36 with 500 searches, and you know, the people that are ranking, like the people are ranking in the 30s. Oh, here's one with 19. So you could be there with cannabis branding, even though the key phrase difficult is a little bit. You know what? I'm going to add this to your list, because I've made a keyword and key phrase ideas list for you guys, and we're going to go through that in a minute.
Good.
So.
And this is a relatively new post, correct?
Yeah, that's just
that's Wednesday.
So I'm just asking a question, Jürgen, here. That would it be possible to actually do a 301 redirect and change the name of the title, since it's so So early?
Yes, totally. I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's early or not. You could always do that, right? So like if you come up with a better episode name after the fact, so I think Robin's asking that's a great insight, Robbie. If you come up with a key phrase idea after the fact, you could still rename it. And actually, if you have the pro version of Yoast, it'll do it automatically. We have to stop it from doing that, right? So the pro version of Yoast, when you rename something and you change the slug, will automatically create a redirect to where anybody going to the old URL still winds up at the new one, right? It just gets forwarded. That's, a really good feature of that. But you don't need to have Yoast Pro. You can just have like a plugin like simple 301 redirects or something like that. But we do that quite a bit. Like, oh my God, we should have, like this is such a good opportunity for an older post or for an older episode. In fact, we're working for a client right now. Robbie's doing most of this work where we are going through their back catalog and we are taking older articles and episodes, bringing them up to date, adding lots of images.
Jürgen.
Yeah.
Oh, how did I mute myself? Oh, hang on. Did I hit me? Can you still hear me, Robbie?
Mm-hmm.
On the stream, it's still my volume.
Nope. Cannot hear if you can hear me.
I can hear.
I can hear you, Rudy. I can hear you, Jürgen, and I can hear you, Susan. So I'm hearing everyone.
Ask whether they hear you.
Not hearing.
Sorry.
No. So is that a Skype thing? Let's ask somebody who's actually, if Lisa's still here or Scott's still here, can you hear us? Just type in yes in the chat space.
I can't hear you.
So they've lost audio.
I don't know if they can hear us or not.
Yeah, we can hear him. I see that he's on mute on Skype.
Oh, on Skype.
I saw Jürgen, you're on mute on Skype.
Okay, let me try and fix that.
You're on mute on Skype, Jürgen.
Don't know why. I must have hit
I see that.
When can you hear me, Susan? Susan can't hear me either, apparently.
What about
now I can. Now we can hear you.
I must have hit a keyword shortcut or something. Sorry about that, guys.
Yeah.
We were still, people on the live stream could still hear us. But yeah. Lisa just actually asked whether that's on, Lisa's another colleague of ours and friends of ours here. Is that with Yoast Premium? Yes, the automatic 301 feature, Lisa, is part of the Yoast Premium offering. But like I said, there are other ways, to do that. And as I was starting to explain, with Robin and I are sort of burning through a back catalog, rewriting or repositioning some of these articles, and there are hundreds of them. And then when we go live with them, there's also a way, now get this, there's also a way to rewrite an article and move the comments from the original article to the new one. So there is a move comments utility that's part of that same work and the same project that we're doing. But in any case, so maybe do you guys want to have a look at the list of keywords that I found that, that might be good keywords for you?
Yes, sure.
So, I'm going to jump in here and hopefully be able to pull up the Creative Outhouse list. So I looked at sort of like 26 keywords here that all have some searches and hopefully are on brand or that are similar, right? So I know that the marketing cannabis one maybe will, we won't go into, won't go into that, but product launch event ideas, for example.
By the way, that's a magnolia behind me. That's not cannabis or anything.
I thought that was going to go with your mojito and your.
We have mint. We actually have mojito. We grow here.
That's great.
I thought you were going to put a match to it or something. We don't have to go through all of these. I'm happy to just sort of send those along in a spreadsheet after the fact. But a couple of them jumped out to me. For example, product launch ideas. Like if you've got a guest and they're talking about product launches or anything like that, it's a relatively low difficulty. So the way that we do this is two ways. We make a list of, excuse me. That's what happens when your phone is connected via Bluetooth to the mixing console. Sorry. What I want to do talk about here is that the way that we often approach this is that we make a list of potential episode topics for the future. And then on the other hand, we go into a tool like, what you're seeing here, and we're trying to create a list of sort of on-brand or related key phrases that are good. And you don't have to make the decision to use any of them until, until after your guest is there. And then if it's a particularly good opportunity, let's say that you were interviewing a digital marketing strategist, right? And there's 1,600 words searches for that. And, and you could, well, actually that is pretty competitive, but there is one in the 20s. So, and consider that a year from now, you'll be in the 20s or you'll be starting to get into the 30s. So you're going to start ranking for things like this, even months after the fact. Here was one, growing medicinal cannabis. Oh, but it has no searches for it. But you would rank for it. I think you also said something about healthcare or consumerization of healthcare.
That's coming up. That's the next episode.
Oh, look, healthcare consumerization's got 200 searches and is pretty easy. Is there anybody in the... Yeah, no, but still a good keyword. So having a tool like this, like KW Finder, or, I don't know, what are you guys using? Susan, are you using something like this today? A keyword research tool?
There's one that has been recommended by another an SEO consultant that we've spoken to. Rudy, what's the Google keyword?
It's a Google keyword.
Just a Google.
Yeah, I think it's called.
Yeah.
The one that Google provides.
The one that Google provides. Many things that Google provides, it's like maybe a little more complicated than they need to be. And there are some very friendly alternatives. I would suggest to you the entire suite of KW Finder, exists not only of that, but also of tracking what your rank is and how well it does over time. So I just want to share the screen really quick. Sorry, I started pointing at something without. So, knowing where you're at and, what's working well and what's not working well with tracking is an amazing part of it. Knowing where your links are coming from. For example, if you ask your guest to link to your podcast and you see that popping up, a little bit later, you can do that. For example, let's do this for you. Let's see who is linking to you. So if I wanted to see creativeouthouse.com and I go into the link miner and we take a look to see who is linking back to you, let's see, who these folks are. Now, I won't go into detail here. There's relatively few. It should be a lot more. Every single guest should be there. And from what I was talking about earlier, this idea of in Buzzsprout actually using the custom domain name is super important. The reason for that is that you're getting links back. And actually with that, for the benefit of some of the other folks on the live stream, do you guys mind if I just jump over to a slide that explains that in a little more detail? The permalink URL thing? Because I just know that I contacted Buzzsprout on your behalf on this, and they do say that they support it. And it's just a matter of when you submit your podcast to be able to put in the episode URL on your website. If anybody has a question around that, put it in the chat, because the challenge with that is that you might not know the episode URL by the time that you record your episode and upload it. There's a way around that, but never mind. We're going to take a look at something else first, and that is, just give me a moment. What I wanted to do is
of the birds.
Are those Atlanta birds?
So I'm just scrolling through some of your other episode show notes pages, Susan, and then this is not for this topic, but just something for you to consider. I don't see that you have any like calls to actions, like get something, download something, where you can get email. And
we just started doing that.
Good. Well, that's great. I mean, all this takes time.
I know. There's like so much.
It's a lot to do.
Sometimes you're like, oh my god.
And then I look at Jay Sunzo. Is that his name? Akunzo?
Jay Akunzo.
Akunzo. And looking at his site, he also has a podcast. I mean, he's not sharing which other shows he's been on. I mean, a lot of high-profile podcasters or authors have media pages, and they make it a practice that on their media page they will put an icon or your brand, and then a link to the episode that they were on. So that gives you a good backlink. So really, like I said at the beginning, encouraging those relationships. So there's this idea of reciprocation.
Robin is very polite with this stuff.
It's really
demand. You're gonna be on this podcast.
Yeah.
You're gonna give me. Here's how it works. We're gonna link to you. We're gonna give you all this benefit, and at the end of the day, you're gonna link to us. Okay, that's the deal.
Yeah,
Right?
So is there a other than just go back on our previous guests and say, we could use your help. Will you put this on your website somewhere so that we have a backlink?
Yeah, totally. If you're comfortable doing that, I think that's totally.
I'm completely comfortable doing that. I mean, they may not all say yes, but if one or two does, that's certainly one or two we don't know.
We've definitely asked them at the time when we're releasing it, we say we'd love for you to put this on your website. It's just none of them have done it. And I think we do have the opportunity to maybe be a little more pushy about that.
Yeah. And you know what too? A lot of times what we could do as well is ask them who we could talk to have it done. Because they're not going to do it. They're going to ask somebody else to do it. Yeah. And just say, we'd like that. And then they'll say, sure, have whoever do it. And we'll contact that person.
I totally get it. Susan, did your mother leave a review for this podcast?
Yeah, I'm sure she has.
She has, good. Yeah, because it's like, it's like pulling teeth. I couldn't get my mother, she's in her 90s, but I couldn't get my mother. So it's just very difficult, so we're cognizant.
We have 31 reviews.
That's not bad. That's good.
And many are not people we know, are not people we asked.
But you know what? The reviews, from my perspective, give me 10 link backs, and and you can keep your 50 reviews.
That's true.
Because they are so much more worthwhile. And here's why you're missing out on some of the link backs. So sorry, I'm going to jump back into just like sharing something else. Or this is one of the reasons, and that is does your podcast host matter for SEO link building? That seemed like a funny question, but we've been talking about this concept of episode permalinks, right? And these permalinks basically mean that in your RSS feed, your website becomes where things are linked to. And this seems technical. This is technical for the geek people, so we're going to skip that. But here's what it looks like in practice. Take a look at this Anchor podcast. If I go and share this, where does the traffic go? It goes to Anchor. They're getting the link juice. They're getting the rank increase. They're getting the traffic, right? So people, if she goes viral with this episode, her own website won't benefit a stitch from that. And what you want instead is, here again is Ken's example on Libsyn. They support permalinks. If somebody shares this, it goes to deeperdatingpodcast.com/E22. By the way, E22 is a redirect to the eventual URL, right? So we knew that this was episode 22. It also makes it easier to give a shout out or to give a call to action on the episode itself. So while you're on audio, say like, hey guys, and for more resources on this show, go to creativeoutdoors.com/E15 or E19 and learn more about our guest there, right? So it's easy to remember, but the real benefit is that it gets baked into your podcast upload, and then what'll happen? What'll happen is that you're starting to get backlinks from Blogspot, from Libsyn, from Stitcher, from Spreaker, right? Because now your iTunes syndication is starting to, to basically syndicate your website baked in, and your backlink profile will go up. So does that make sense? So the link building thing starts, with that.
So we should, in order, go back and look at the URL links and adjust those to Yoast, and then reach out to our former guests and say, will you put these on your...
Yes, and go back into the 50, or just hire an intern or someone, or or get someone on Fiverr to change the permalink URL on your Buzzsprout episodes to your actual show notes, because you're creating beautiful content now. And, it's a shame that that's not what actually gets distributed on your podcast audio and players. So that's easy. That's an easy project to do. It'll take like a day to go back into your back catalog and update all the permalinks so that they actually point to your show. And I see that, I don't want to say it was a mistake, but it's kind of like it's a big lost opportunity, like that makes it a big difference.
Yeah, particularly, when we have this notion that it's evergreen content. So we're wanting to elevate it over time and be found increasingly in the first pages of and search engine when people are looking for that kind of content.
Yeah, absolutely. So okay, I mean, I guess that's sort of like where the recommendations from us would sort of lie. I mean, if I look back just real quick again into just
one thing while you're doing that, Jürgen.
Yeah.
So another thing that, I've tried all of these different things and I run out of steam a lot of the time. I love the idea, but the actual implementation is not
Sure.
strength.
Sure.
But it's I would send. I would create, and that's another tool we use, like SmarterQ. I would create a series of tweets or posts that can be shared across LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, mainly those ones, and I would share those with my guests. So I've done the work for myself to promote a particular episode. So why not give that also to my guest, and that makes their job easier. So some of them do.
We do that.
Don't. You do.
Yeah, we do that.
That's great. Very good.
But the backlinks is things we really need to work on. We've not done that before.
Yeah, when we ask our guests to share the episodes, we give them the link to our site, and a graphic and even sample post copy, so that at least we know for sure when the guests have shared it, they're sharing it to our site, or they're just retweeting what we tweet. Often they do that. They prefer to just retweet or share from our Facebook or LinkedIn page instead of posting it themselves.
That's awesome. Yeah, the easier you make it for your guests, the more likely it is that they're going to follow through. And so another backlink thing, which I didn't know whether you guys do or not. Let's take a look at if I looked at of actually this on. I'm trying to pull up the. So you have show notes that are built in on Buzzsprout, right? So if I was to look this episode up, or if I was to share this and look at the Buzzsprout, I'm just going to try to copy this link and paste it in. So let's have a look at this episode on Buzzsprout. Oh, good. So you have the link here. So that really means that in these show notes on Buzzsprout, at least, this does show up. I'm not sure that all of these show notes make it into Apple Podcasts. Do you put a separate description in when you upload to Apple?
I don't put a separate description, but those show notes do show up in Apple.
They do. Okay, good. Because Apple doesn't support links, but for example, if we looked up marketing upheaval on Stitcher, and here's an episode, and I click on read more. Oh no, that's funny, because Stitcher usually supports links, or converts the links that you're putting in into clickable content. So I'm surprised that on Stitcher somehow this didn't come across. But fair enough. So you should be, the link building. I mean, I think it's a minor adjustment then, to basically go back through your back catalog and make sure that when somebody shares it on social media, that you're earning the backlinks. But I think that's a good double check to do anyway.
Okay.
So yeah, any of what about the keywords that we started looking into? Let me look again under KW Finder, your list. What else would you like to add if you've got other topics coming up, and you would want to see which topics might be good opportunities for you? Do you have some that you can think of?
Well, good.
I think it would be good to, review the keywords and then have those keywords in mind when we're formulating the questions for our next guests.
Yeah.
Yeah. So is there anything coming up that, I only looked up 25 of them, right? So do you have some others that you want to look up right now, or we can leave it here and I can just send you this table?
It's funny. We had a backlog of episodes, and we have about one more in the can, and then we were talking about what our next one ought to be. And this conversation will help us inform that, what our next one ought to be. The next one that's coming out is about healthcare, and it's about orthopedics and about women in business. And then after that, we talked to John
Wall from
Wall,
Marketing Over Coffee.
Marketing Over Coffee. And then after that, we don't have one right now. We need to figure out what our next episode.
You just do it. You just do it as you as you go. I mean, orthopedic seems.
Would you like to be a guest and talk about SEO?
I have to set aside some time for guesting because I'm swamped at the moment. But I'd love to. Sure, I think that'd be awesome.
You share the show with.
Yeah.
Would you give us another backlink?
Share the show,
yeah. You're getting a backlink already. Come on.
Yeah.
So, orthopedic. Oh my God, orthopedist. We're talking with
orthopedic surgery. It's an orthopedic surgery practice. It's the largest orthopedic surgery practice in the Southeast, actually.
Pediatric or what sort?
No, adult. Primarily adult orthopedic. Hip replacement, knee replacement, knee surgeries, that sort of thing.
Adult orthopedics or orthopedic, I guess, like I never.
Yeah. Sometimes it's spelled with an P-A-E-D-I-C. Sometimes it's spelled with P-E-D-I-C.
P-E-D-I-C.
A-E would be Jish.
Pedix.
Got
you. Have you ever heard of, if you don't have this tool, you mentioned Google keyword research tool. This here it's a really, I think for me, best back for the money in terms of, having all of these extra features on it. But have you ever heard of Ubersuggest?
No.
That is a free keyword research tool by a guy named Neil Patel. And, he's an awesome SEO guy. One of the, biggest one there, had a couple of exchanges on the blog and all that. But it's a keyword suggestion tool that's free to use. I think he's going to start charging for it soonish. I think they already has a pricing plan for, that I'm just trying to click on and the page not loading very quickly. I'll just leave it out. But right now it's just free. So if you are thinking about doing some of this research, like you're saying, and Susan, you're thinking about like, hey, here's my next episode coming up, I can suggest this as a free alternative. What we find is that the databases behind each one of these systems have different levels of maturity and different sort of focus features. So I also use something called SpyFu. And actually, if I look at SpyFu, and I looked at your site, right now, SpyFu is saying that organically you're ranking for 5 keywords. And that, maybe your domain has been around for like 8 years. And so this is where we get sort of the click value from, and we're doing some research here. So this is your goal, is to go in and increase the organic presence in the top 100, by the way, this means, in the top 100 search results. So the data that is here is different from, if I did the same research in KW Finder, let me go, we're done with this. Let me just actually, I'm just going to link to this page and our follow-up for you.
What are the 5 words?
They are, drumroll please, Brett Bruin.
What?
Okay.
One of our guests.
Oh, I guess he was a former advisor to President Obama.
Oh, okay, cool. Marketing for Comedian, Chemistry Atlanta, award-winning nonprofit podcast agency. Are you that?
Are we chemistry? Chemistry is another ad agency in Atlanta. We had someone from Chemistry as our guest.
Oh, I see. But your podcast page is ranking for this, which is kind of interesting. You see the page, if I click on that /podcast, actually, I'd have to open it.
That's
your podcast homepage, probably, right? Yeah.
It is, because we won some awards for our podcast.
Yeah, which is awesome, right? Anyway, so my point more is that it's good to track the progress that you have with a tool like KW Finder or other tools, so that you see what you can focus on, because the focus areas ideally are trying to get back to our original. And that's, since you don't have that many yet, I'm just going to type in polymash.com just to give an example of something. So the reason that I think that these are, so, I've dropped off a little bit too. I'm only getting $2,600 worth of free traffic at the moment per month. But when I look at the keywords that I do rank for and then sort them sort of like from one to whatever, my focus needs to be on the ones that are just off of page one. So just strategically speaking, doing this research for someone, going through a back catalog, going, like even if we have clients that we're helping, and they want to say, look, can you help us get, better rankings or get some content onto page one? Where I would be focusing on are some of the posts that are now lingering on page two, because as you can appreciate, the difference between being on page two and page one is, significant. You get like way more clicks and way more traffic once you're on page one for something. And so monitoring that is super important. And I would recommend something like KW Finder and the SEO Mangold suite, or you can sort of stitch this together with free tools and hopefully not have to revert to Google's built-in services, which I find very difficult. So how's that? I mean, any other questions or thoughts that that you have that we could provide anything for you in?
Well, I think this has been very helpful. Thank you so much. The bridge that I want us to be able to cross is for us to, yes, find our podcast, but more importantly, have the right people find our podcast, people who are going to hire us, not necessarily just people who want to listen to our podcast.
Yeah.
And so maybe that has to do with maybe the type of content that we're issuing, or maybe it has to do with the search terms we use. I don't know. I think that's the thing. That's the bridge I want to cross. We can do all these things to bring more people to our podcast, but in the end, it's got to come out as some sort of way to increase revenue.
Yeah, I follow. I mean, so it's content marketing from your perspective. What marketing automation platform are you using, just if I may ask?
We don't really have an automation platform. We don't have any automated.
Okay, because here, like Rudy, if I'm hearing you, like that is the next step. That is an interesting area for you guys to look into, and we can take this offline because it's not exactly podcast specific. But we use something called SharpSpring. We're actually a reseller for them, which is sort of like HubSpot, but for a fraction of the price. And where I'm going with that is that it actually provides you insights and allows you to start profiling people's repeated visits over the last 6 months to your website and to your podcast episodes. And you can start, like it's not, I mean, there are others out there, like ActiveCampaign does something similar. The one that we use is SharpSpring. If you guys ever want to see a demo of it, for retargeting and for actually tagging and keeping track of an audience, there's something called Life of the Lead. And once somebody joins your email list, you can actually go back and see and create tags and make decisions around the marketing that you present to them to become more relevant. So don't think of it as creepy, think of it as putting yourself in a position to better serve the interests that your audience is already expressing. So if someone, looks at all your cannabis episodes and, and has downloaded your cannabis lead magnet, you kind of know where the game is at, right? You need to provide more content for that. I just joshing, right? But but if you're, but if you're in healthcare or in and you're looking to sort of like segment your audience very cleverly, we spend a lot of time on that and on being able to do that. There are things also that you could do with chatbots. By the way, SharpSpring has built-in video conferencing, has a built-in chatbot, has a built-in retargeting system. By retargeting, I mean is that when somebody has been to your site or your podcast, and they will go to CNN or Yahoo or elsewhere for a fraction of the money, for literally, I spent like $20 and I sold $400 worth of courses with this strategy, meaning that you can follow them around, right? So your presence of mind after you can retarget ads outside of Facebook. I'm not talking about in Facebook. That's typically what people think of when you say retargeting, is because it's baked into the Facebook platform. But outside of Facebook, you can also create display ads that, you know, that attract people to some of your very relevant things. So if it's healthcare, if you're a healthcare marketing product that you're offering, or you're specializing in a particular field, you start to be able to use both retargeting and marketing automation platforms to, you know, just better understand and pare down your ad spend to be meaningful for the audience that's already interested. So sorry for that aside to the podcast interested listeners. I didn't mean to go there, but that's maybe offsite. We should have a conversation around how some of that can really be helpful to get the most out of your podcast if there's a business intent behind it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Okay, guys. Well, that was thank you for being our guinea pig Skype dialer inners and putting it on mute and like your patience with all of it. We had good fun, and so we'll hope to follow up. You'll look for an email from us with the research result from today. Loved having you on the show. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye for now. And so, Robbie, now I'm learning how to hang up a Skype call successfully. There we go. And muting myself on the show or elsewhere. Okay.
Anyway, the reference to Sharp Spring wasn't in vain because Lisa Byers on the line and she was curious to know about that. So I sent her the URL.
Oh yes, Lisa. I'm really happy that you were here as well, and we can continue a conversation around that.
We also had a sole person on our Facebook page, and saying he was the only one.
Did you?
I've invited him over to YouTube.
Oh, very
but
good.
I haven't seen him show up yet.
Because he would, Nisar, would probably not have seen all the chat activity that was happening on YouTube because he's joining us on Facebook. And in fact, if I went and, here is the chat as it appeared. It's a little bit small, but so we've had a good bit of activity on various platforms. I don't think there's anyone on Twitch, but.
So Jürgen, where would you like to go? Because
so let's see whether we wrap this up. I mean, I think we touched upon pretty much everyone. Let me pull up our little. Just a second. Let me pull up our incoming cards here. I think would just want to give a shout out to Amanda Span's MVP podcast. That was another one, another submission. I think it might have come from the UK. I'm not sure because it has a UK address and it's kind of late there already. And I don't think we saw her on the chat. But her podcast is, I love this MVP, Minimum Viable Podcast, that cracked me up. And I've had a conversation with her before. And she's had a very successful launch, but now she's worrying about or wanting to launch a website that basically contributes to the show. And it's actually a very attractive looking site, but it has no presence on any of the search engines yet. And Amanda, if you're watching this, when I searched for this on Google or elsewhere, I couldn't find it anywhere. And it's a great looking site. You have individual show notes, which is also really good. I would, along the same lines as what we had just talked about with Rudy and and with Susan, I wouldn't necessarily put EP-19 at the front of your URL. Again, to stress that, if your key phrase or if what you wanted to be this episode to be found under would be being the brand, for example, and if you had that as the key phrase, you want that to be the URL. So this entire thing, or Shayla Marie. I mean, it might also be that people know her or you're a celebrity you interview. So those things to have in the URL are good, but EP19 does not need to be in the slug. And the entire website, when I actually looked at the page source and I looked for analytics, there's nothing. If I look for Google, fonts from Google, but nothing else. So I suspect that this website just hasn't been sent to or registered with Google yet, and that's obviously one of the very first things that need to happen for it to to have a sitemap for it to be submitted to Google on a regular basis. What I did love is that you've got the permalink URL nailed. So if someone shares this episode, they would be sharing this particular page on the podcast. So well done for that. I think that's really great. You had some questions around episode ideas and virtual remote working, entrepreneurship in COVID, anything COVID and coronavirus from an SEO perspective right now, just stay away from it. It is way too competitive. There's barely any content out there in the world that does not talk about COVID. So I'm like, I wouldn't, I would just stay away from that. That said, I did take a look at a few ideas for potential episode topics for you, and I will send you this link. So, for example, virtual reality training systems or virtual reality employee training. And there was another one on here that I thought was, another one of these good. If you had the idea for the name of a podcast called the Virtual Employee Podcast, have a look at this. Have a look at this opportunity. 3,600 people are searching for the term virtual employee, and it is a low difficult phrase. And look at this. This is my point earlier. Virtualemployees.com has a domain authority of 4. I'm going to just try to zoom in on that one again. Right? So here is somebody who is ranking on page 1 of Google and getting a ton of this traffic because their site includes the key phrase that they want to rank for. So if anybody wanted to take out the virtualemployeepodcast.com, it would make for an awesome opportunity. So Amanda, I'm sure that you're maybe not you have got a great podcast name already. I was just throwing that in there, as another example of how SEO can really help a podcast be on page 1, just like was the case with Katie. There was someone asking, what are we using to produce this software with? And it's Ecamm Live, and you can just go to polymash.me/ecamlive, and that's our affiliate link. If you were kind enough to use that, to check it out, we love this.
I've dragged it across.
Yeah, it's actually on this. It's actually on the polymash.com/live page. There's a section on the tools that we use for this stuff. And the disclaimer: there are some affiliate links at no cost to you. I earn a small commission for putting out content like this and trying to help people out. I think those were my recommendations for Amanda, and I think that pretty much brings us towards the end of all I've got. That's all I got, folks, for this episode. But we've gone long enough. We kept it to we kept it under 2 hours, but it's still an hour and a half. I hope it's been instructional for the folks that hung out for all this time. I want to say a big thank you. I want to say a big thank you for our guests, both Rudy and Susan. It was lovely having them on the show. It was great fun talking to them. And everyone on the channel, John Roth and Lisa, thank you for joining as well. Did you put a link into to SharpSpring? Actually, Lisa, I can help you with the SharpSpring thing. But it's Sharp, SPRING, and because we're an agency on them, we have an ability to hook up our partners for a fraction of the cost of what you might see listed on their website. But basically, you're talking about HubSpot at 10% of the cost to begin with. So with that, Robbie, any last words of wisdom from your end?
No, I'm saving those till next time, which will be in 2 weeks' time. And so I just want to say thanks to those guys who showed up again. For example, Sourdough.
Yes, absolutely.
Our mate Scott. And a couple of others who have revisited us. And sure, we go over some of the background just for the uninitiated, and then we'd like to dive in and do some real live, real-time fixing.
Yes, I hope this was a good mix of sort of both. We're trying to, respond to the chat, allow people to ask questions real time on live, do some live things, but also do some level setting based on, our experience in the past. So really, again, thank you for everything. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Take a look at polymash.com/live for the replay from this, because we're starting to list all of our episodes for SEO Saturdays there. And the folks whose podcasts we reviewed and gave shout outs to on today's episode, keep a lookout also on polymash.com/live, and through via email, you're going to get a link and backlink and podcast listing and your episodes featured, or your podcast featured on our show notes. So with that, it is Jürgen and Robin signing off from now sunny Bradenton, Florida, which is, we're going to enjoy the rest of the weekend and socially connect and be physically distant, not between the two of us, not just everyone else.
All right.
Thank you. All right. Bye for now.